I actually do think if you've never watched those movies, first of all, Batman Returns is the best of them. And it's just a really good movie. It's not even just a good comic book, it's just a good movie, mate.
A few moments later.
This is a movie I will never watch again in my life unless essentially I am incapacitated in an old person's home and someone forcibly puts it onto the television.
Welcome back to Foreplay. We are starting our Christmas arc, including one movie that will actually release after Christmas. So watch it before Christmas, but then you'll see the episode probably in the first week of January. We're a little late on the timing, it turns out. Our first movie that we're going to be talking about is Batman Returns, the second Tim Burton Batman movie. We are then going to be doing Scrooged, followed by It's a Wonderful Life, and finishing off with Tokyo Godfathers. That's right, actually doing an anime movie, because you never stop asking me Thorin questions on Summoning Insight in our fan feedback section about anime, so you finally get to hear us talking about anime, a very good one by Satoshi Kon. But we've got to talk about Batman Returns first. Now, I think we all had perhaps fond memories of this film. I had not seen it in a very long time. This movie is terrible.
I'll just give people an upset of what the expectation as to why we might think that. It's because, first of all, this movie came out in 1992. I haven't watched this movie in a long, long time. I will have rewatched it, but I also probably was still a teenager, maybe 22 or something, But when this movie came out, I was there. And I remember, because I was a kid and this Batman movie came out, this was the biggest movie in the world. And this was considered like epic shit. Like, you had all these massive superstar actors in it. Tim Burton's directing it. The first movie was a success already, the Jack Nicholson one. And it was treated, when it came out, universally loved. It was treated like it was The Matrix or something, mate. And sadly, I really did have like a little fucking candle going all these years for this movie and thinking like, nah, this and the first one, they're fucking good. By the way, I'll start at the outset. Obviously, normally I'd start, I actually can't even tell you what I think of Batman, the first one now from 1989. Because in light of this one, I must go and revisit it because it might be shit. Because holy fuck, this movie is ropey. Like, it's actually, and by the way, the worst thing about it is it gets more underwhelming as the movie goes. Like, the first parts, I actually found I could find some things in it, and I thought it got really bad. I can't believe how bad this movie is. It shocks me.
What's so depressing when you watch this movie, guys, is that they had all of the ingredients for this to be an extremely good movie. They had an insane budget. They had sets that are extraordinary, like really fucking cool artistic design, great miniatures, huge budget, excellent actors, honestly. Like, they got the casting is very good. It's just that the writing of this film, this might be one of the worst written films that I have ever seen.
Is actually
the dialogue is horrible.
Fucking appalling.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, look, so let's before we eviscerate this movie, because it looks like we're all on the same page for a change.
Oh, there are some positives. Should we get the positives out the way first? Yeah, let's do it.
Well, so what I want to do is I want to set the table a little bit, because I don't think the younglings will really understand how big a deal 1989's Batman was. And I want to start there. I think that's very important context to sort of, before you even get into critiquing this movie. When it was announced that there was going to be a big studio Batman directed by Tim Burton, the fervor around this movie was insane. In fact, it's probably the first big studio blockbuster push I can really remember. And by that, I mean, you couldn't go McDonald's Happy Meals. Constant
the Prince song, that Bat dance song. Yeah, Prince did a fucking song.
Prince did the soundtrack for 1989's Batman. This shit is insane.
Prince, yeah,
exactly. And it's everywhere. And obviously Jack Nicholson as the Joker, which was considered a real coup in terms of casting. And just everything about this movie. The commercial crossovers for the original 1989 Batman were insane. In fact, in Britain, and this is a fact that many people might not know, this was one of the movies, if not the movie, where studios were so interested in getting more people to see it. It was the original movie that drove the 12 certificate. So it's different for Americans, but you have your R, you have your letters. We had numbers, and so it goes like PG. And then there was just a jump up from Universal, anyone can watch it, PG, kids, but you might get a scary scene like, fucking Transformers the movie or whatever, that's a PG. Then it would jump up to 15, and then 18 were your adult movies. Well, because Batman existed in this weird sort of between world where it's like, there was some dark scenes, you're watching Jack Nicholson fall into a chemical vat and have all his face fucked up.
Didn't he kill someone in that, like a bunch of times as well?
Yeah, number of murders. So, they were like, fuck, but if we give it a 15, it's going to affect box office. So, essentially the censors were petitioned, and we ended up with a 12. And I know this because another little stipulation of the 12 in Britain was if you went with an adult, you could go. It didn't matter if you were 12 or not. You could go in. I saw Batman as a very young kid in the cinemas because this movie was a phenomenon. Now, you fast forward 3 years.
It was also, by the way, the movie that really kicked off Tim Burton being a major director, too, because before that he had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, both of which were very weird kind of niche movies. And this was like, they were
in the opening of this movie, Pee-wee Herman cameo.
Yeah, correct.
Not a people won't notice that.
Yeah, and so anyway, like, I don't think there was a more highly anticipated sequel at this time. And it was a sequel that nearly didn't happen because Tim Burton doesn't read comics, didn't understand Batman, and did not want to do this sequel. And so the first thing you have to understand is this is a sequel to one of the biggest movies of the 80s. It's a huge commercial success. It made 10 times its budget, right? But the problem the studios had was that even though there was huge studio influence on the first one, they really wanted their man, Tim Burton, to do the sequel. And Tim Burton was coming off Edward Scissorhands, which was another critical darling in 1990 that made 4 times its budget. It was a super small budget movie. Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, everybody loved it. It was like a little romantic, sweet thing with Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp. And so they were like, look, we want that Tim Burton feeling, but we want it for Batman. Will you come back and do another Batman? Have I got a second series? And Tim Burton said, only if you give me creative control. And so they gave him carte blanche for this film. And it is a fucking disaster because of that. This is not a conventional superhero movie by any standards.
One of the blessings, though, is that because he did this movie, he himself could not direct The Nightmare Before Christmas, which probably turned out better because he wasn't directing it.
Well, sure, but I mean, listen, I love that movie.
It's great.
But what I will say is, when you watch this, and I'd totally forgotten this aspect, all of the classic Tim Burton tropes are all over this movie right from the start. It begins with a comedically bad but sort of dark scene of the Penguin, Danny DeVito's character, the famous Penguin from the Batman comics. He's born deformed. You hear a baby crying in a room, and it's an opulent mansion. And the doctor walks out, and he's like, "Oh!" And the doctor's horrified at what he's just birthed. And then in the next scene, it's his wealthy parents drinking martinis with a baby in a cage who grabs a cat and murders it.
It is so Tim Burton, though, isn't it?
Titles of but while this is happening, it's like got that classic Danny Elfman, soundtrack, and the snow and everything, and
like the
what
weird,
is happening?
The weird like Rococo aristocrats that are his parents that are like clinking martini glasses as they cage their, newborn child. I mean, this is like peak Tim Burton, right? Because he does all this very surrealist, like dark surrealism.
I'll do you one better than peak Tim Burton. This is unchecked Tim Burton, and that's the problem from start to finish with this fucking turd. I don't even know how we all ended up here watching this film. Frankly, it wasn't me. One of you is to blame. There you go. But I mean, but like much like Duncan, as a teen, in fact, not even a teenager, a kid. That when this movie came out, I went to see it in the cinema. I had nothing but kind of like fond memories of it, particularly Danny DeVito, which I think real talk his performance holds up.
He's great in this.
And it's probably the only good thing in the film.
No, but I think Michelle Pfeiffer's performance is also quite good. It's just,
no, I am not having that,
there.
sir. We'll get into that. Yeah, we will.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's what I will say. I don't understand why you would make a Batman movie and then not put Batman in it.
I said the exact same thing when I was watching this movie.
He's not in the film. Where's Batman?
Michael Keaton's only job is to grotesquely ogle Michelle Pfeiffer. That is literally like she walks into the office where Bruce Wayne meets her, and he is like cartoonishly ogling her up and down, and then his only other purpose is to provide a like makeout scene in the mansion, and all of the rest of the scenes with Batman are him just in a mask punching literal clowns.
Yeah, which I also don't really get. Like, was it ever explained in the film? Because I might have missed it. Because I'll be honest, this was a slog to get to the end for me. I was thinking about
too long,
this
right?
episode.
Why is this movie so
is
long?
like 2 hours and 10 minutes, dude.
It's over 2 hours long. It's so
it just
long.
never ends. But I was like, oh, I'll just phone it in. I just won't watch it, and I just won't say anything in the episode. But I forced myself to get through it. But does it explain why they're because the Penguin? It doesn't do clowns.
I believe the inference, even though it's incredibly tenuous, is because he himself is a freak, even though, remember, he was sent to the zoo. That would mean like circus freaks would be the only people you could bond with and would take you in. And then they're obviously a crime gang at the same time. I don't think that was explained though, Rich. I believe that's just treated as though there's the clowns at the zoo. I thought the same thing as you. Like,
I think
you need a bit of explain it here.
I think it was explained because they did a very fast sequence where like Bruce Wayne was in the Batcave looking over old microfilm. And I think it was explained there because he was looking up all the records of the red triangle. Is that what it's called? The red triangle. Yeah. Crime group. And it was explained there, but it was they passed over it very quickly. And the fact that it doesn't make any sense is, even if they explain it, it still doesn't make sense. So I don't really care.
Here's the problem. This gets to the core of the movie, in my opinion. If no one's ever seen it, from memory, I'm going off here. There's a weird detail, which is, if people know, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith, the guy who did those movies, Clerks and Mallrats and those, right? And if people don't know, famously, he obviously has always been an indie director his whole career. But bizarrely, there was a period in time where both as a filmmaker, he started to get more offers. And then he actually, before he had a podcast, got famous as a personality because he did these things, An Evening with Kevin Smith, where he would do like people paid, they went to a theater, it was filmed, you could watch them all online, and then essentially it turns out he's as you can see, if he does a podcast, he's a raconteur. He's got a great like storytelling, really funny commentary. Really good. In one of these, what he does essentially to give it the real spice is he drops a bunch of behind the scenes goss about Hollywood and his career. And what he explains is that after these Batman movies, the studio was going to get Tim Burton to do Superman. This was the story of when he was going to do it with like Nicolas Cage and all that shit as Superman. And so basically they brought on Kevin Smith, who himself is a lifelong comics fan and even had written some comics around this time, I believe. And they brought him in and he was going to sort of maybe write the script for it. And what happened was, the story goes, obviously, watch this thing online if you want to. You'll be able to buy it from Amazon or something. Basically, in the story, he sort of explains that he went to a mansion. I don't think he was working with Tim Burton. He's like he was working with like the producer that was going to work with Tim Burton. And basically, he's thinking, when you bring me in as a scriptwriter, that I'm going to come in. He already prepped a load of stuff like, let's do this angle. We could tackle it this way. And it's like, no. It's the other way around. Like, first of all, it's Tim Burton's Superman. So it's going to be like Tim Burton's vision of it. And again, Tim Burton isn't a comics fan. He doesn't read comics. So Tim Burton's perspective on that, essentially, Tim Burton's treating it, I'll give you the analogy. It's like some pop act asks a really underground electronic act to do a remix of their single. You're not going to do it like the pop angle. You're going to take like their elements, destroy them, and make it into your shit so that people in the underground electronic scene say, hey, this is dope. And look, he took that dog shit material. He must be a genius. So as far as I can tell, Tim Burton always just wanted to impose his own ideas top down onto this comic book universe. He didn't want to take the essence of Batman, because I initially thought in this movie, as an aside, even though he has like the fucking Batmobile and modern tech, there's elements where they almost try to imply, because of the origins of the Batman comic, it almost looks like Gotham's in the 50s though, even though that doesn't really make sense.
All the
and
Art
so
Deco.
I actually thought, oh shit, is this actually going to be the clever angle to the movie? Because, for example, people will know Batman famously isn't called Batman. It was from Detective Comics. So Batman should be, first and foremost, a detective. Essentially, there's one scene Richard talks about where he checks up a bunch of stuff about like Christopher Walken and the Penguin. That's it. After that, he's just beating the fuck out of people. And that's it. So basically, to me, I actually do think what happened was basically, like I say, I don't think that actually, I think essentially, Monty, the answer as to why those clowns are in it is because Tim Burton loves clowns and wanted to have clowns in a bunch of stuff. He didn't want to just have a goon but beating you up. He wanted to be able to do theatricality and to do things. By the way, I can see how it's creative. It means instead of just shooting a guy, you have a guy come along in a big thing and then it's like he opens up and then something pops out with a machine gun or that. It's like a way to allow, it's like an artistic license excuse to do whatever you wanted to do anyway visually. So sadly, that's sort of like the good and the bad of this movie concisely set up, because even the good things about it are just Tim Burton doing shit. Like you say, the sets and stuff, you know. The
sets are amazing. And I think like visually it's very successful. And in fact, it does. What's so interesting to me about this film is that more than anything else, this film has obviously inspired other Batman related media. Like it is definitively.
The animated series clearly took like the fucking Batmobile and stuff like that. Come on, man.
The animated series, but let's talk about the Arkham games, like Arkham Asylum, Arkham City. I've played these games. They are clearly drawing from this film when it comes to the art style is almost identical to some of the sets that are in this film. And I just forgotten that, but now that I think about the Arkham games, so it's like it actually has had a very big effect on the aesthetic of Batman, which I think is unique, and like we can appreciate it for that, because honestly a lot of the sets are good. But we should go over the actual plot here, because I'm going to explain things and how they happen, and if you are confused about why they happen, we all are. So I'm going to say a bunch of shit that is going to sound like non sequiturs that doesn't make any sense whatsoever about why people do things or how things happen. And you just have to kind of roll with it, right? So,
rather you than me. Go for it.
As Richard said, this starts with the Penguin basically being Moses. And he actually turns out to be Moses in more ways than one, or kind of like reverse Moses at a time. So they put him in his basket into the sewer of Gotham, and like Moses, except in a sewer, he floats down, and then he is discovered by.
He means biblical Moses, not the esports caster.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, that might have happened to. That might have happened to esports Moses too. I don't technically know his birth story, but maybe that's why he called himself Moses. I don't know. So we're going to get. So we see this basket floating down the river. At which point,
so appalled they immediately rejected him for his family, Richard. He had to find his life with the.
It's just outrageous. This is such an out of pocket thing to even joke about, actually. But whatever, fuck it. Let it ride. He's not even going to defend himself. Love you, Jason.
Just catching strays on a not esports show. So he arrives at some penguins who we are supposed to assume raise him. That's the implication that is given. He is literally raised by penguins. So he's
penguins, that well-known species that definitely is real. Yeah.
So then we cut forward to decades later, right? And he is basically blackmailing Christopher Walken's character, Max Schreck, who is a Gotham City industrialist trying to build a power plant. And this is where one of the Christmas themes actually comes in, because this movie takes place all around Christmas. There's lots of talk about Christmas. Max Schreck, Christopher Walken, is trying to pretend that he's a benevolent Santa Claus, but in reality, he's building not a power plant, but a capacitor to like hoard the energy of Gotham. And he's trying to get like Bruce Wayne to pay for it, which also doesn't make any sense. And so effectively, Penguin like tries to he succeeds and kidnaps him, and then blackmails him with all the stuff in the sewer, saying, hey, your factories, Max Schreck, are creating all this toxic waste, and I have all the evidence of these crimes, so you are going to help me out and like make me a public hero, and I'm going to figure out who my parents are. He gets him access to Gotham's like Hall of Records, where he writes down apparently all of the firstborn sons of Gotham in a very short amount of time. I don't know how you could do that, because Gotham's like New York City, but we'll ignore that. So we do have Selena Kyle, who becomes Catwoman.
Keep going, actually. Keep going.
So we have Selena Kyle, who's Catwoman, who's Max Schreck's secretary. She starts doing some research, understands his plan, and then he tries to kill her, pushes her out the window of a skyscraper. She falls out, lives, then gets... I don't know how else to say this.
Say it, Christopher. Say it.
There's like a cat orgy on top of her, and then she then she learns martial arts from that. Like, I don't really understand how this works. And she receives what I suppose we should assume is some level of brain damage from this fall, and starts to act really crazy. And basically goes
stupid, sexy brain damage.
Yeah,
the best kind of brain damage.
Stupid, sexy BDSM brain damage.
Oh yeah.
So she goes home and immediately creates herself a black leather onesie that is obviously fetish apparel, and then takes a whip, which I don't know how she learned to use, and I don't know also how she can do a million handsprings in a row when she was really clumsy as a secretary, but that happens. And then we get a sequence where, for whatever reason, Christopher Walken decides it's a good idea to have the Penguin run for mayor, even though he's a complete degenerate, basically so he can get his power plant in and manipulate him as a puppet. Doesn't make any sense. And then they kidnap a woman. So the Penguin and Catwoman has a beef with Batman for reasons that are never actually explained, but also is trying to have sex with him. And they kidnap a woman, then kill her.
By the way, your editorialization is almost as bad as the movie, mate. I think I've got deals with all these, but keep going. Keep going. I'll try and nail as many. I'll write them all down, Monty. Okay, so okay. Right. Let's go.
There we go. Then there's a fight sequence where they try and frame Batman for the woman that they push off a building and kill, so that everybody hates Batman. And then he records Penguin saying a bunch of stuff, which then he broadcasts as a speech of the Penguin to turn the people against him. Penguin goes crazy, tries to kill all of the firstborn sons of Gotham, like in the biblical story surrounding Moses, except it's he's like the God figure, even though he was the Moses figure earlier at his birth. And then they just, like, Catwoman and Batman discover, after having sexy time as Catwoman and Batman, and then also sexy time as Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle, that they figure out each other's true identities or their masked identities at a masquerade ball in which they're the only two not wearing masks, which is also just really fucking weird. And then Penguin gets into a giant fight trying to kill everybody's firstborn son. There is a scene, and I shit you not, with an army of penguins that have been cybernetically enhanced and are being controlled with rockets on their backs to go destroy the city and murder the firstborn sons. And then there's a fight inside the abandoned zoo's penguin exhibit where basically everybody dies. I don't know how else to put it, guys.
Right, here's the thing. I think we need to get all the good stuff out of the way still first, and then we can just do all the destruction.
Well,
all
the good stuff. Yeah, go on, real quick.
First of all, yes, if you actually watch, especially before the movie gets bad, I'd say the first third of the movie, actually Tim Burton's vision is the best part about the movie. Like things like he does have art deco classic, like Titanic statues, things. And like when they're inside Max Schreck's office and it has that really weird, like almost like padded cell effect on the background. The way he does do Gotham, like I say, it has modern technology, but it almost looks like the 50s, by the way. He's obviously just understood that he probably looked at when Detective Comics came out. He's still trying. Gotham obviously has always been in the same way, like a fucking. It's funny because people don't know this. In Superman, Metropolis is like the cool yippie version of New York, and Gotham, even though it's a separate city, is like the dark version of New York. It's more like Hell's Kitchen or something, isn't it? You're trying to imply that to it. So there's these elements that are within it in that sense, and so I do think visually it is epic. Like I actually think that one part. In fact, that's the one part I even feel like is why it almost makes sense to make Tim Burton be the director. Because what he has done here is this is before you are allowed 100% serious comic movies. Even Superman, the movie, has wacky elements in it, etc. What you have to do in this era, hence why Richard says they stupidly think we need to court a 12-year-old audience. Not talking about certain game developers there. What they try to do is they actually basically are obviously thinking you got to make it a bit like the comic though, haven't you, mate? And so if anything, he's trying to make like cartoonish elements be part, which by the way is Tim Burton's whole style. People will know all the shit he's done with Johnny Depp. That's essentially his wheelhouse. And in that regard, he's doing a good job. The problem, I think, is, one, he clearly doesn't understand comics or the material. In fact, I would go as far as to say I think he has contempt for it. And then secondly, I actually think he takes later on some of the worst elements of comics, like dialogue, etc., that we get to. And even then, by the way, mate, read some comics, you were about 40 years out of date on that dialogue, okay? So then you get to like, I thought that part was great. Similarly, every now and then there are some really good pieces of direction. I'll give you a great example. The first time that Catwoman, when she's Selena Kyle before she's become Catwoman, meets Bruce Wayne when he's just punching out people, and it does this really interesting, almost like Citizen Kane like shot of like light hitting just Batman's eyes like this. And dude, that makes the fucking, even though other elements are wacky, that looks dope. That really does have like, whoa, it's got like a sinister, like a menacing aspect to it. It gives him a crazy presence. Michael Keaton's face actually looks great in the mask. That's one of the better elements of the movie, even though it has the obvious problem we'll get to later of like, you can clearly see like he can't move his head like a bird. Like he has to just move like this, which, because it's a massive latex thing, isn't it? Like, what would you do?
He cannot turn his head,
You know, the joke I would say to Richard is, what would you do if you were trapped inside a load of latex? You wouldn't be able to, you know, I imagine, you know, that's a joke. That's a free one for you there, Richard. You know, anyway, so that, I thought that was pretty good. That was kind of fire. Even though I do think Michael Keaton has massive problems as fucking Bruce Wayne, as we alluded to. As Batman, does a decent enough job, actually. Seems like he's not too bad. I thought that was pretty good. I also did actually agree. There are a couple of performances that are really good in this movie. Like Danny DeVito completely does his job, understood the assignment entirely. I don't think he did anything wrong whatsoever. He was over the top when he needed to be. It was scary. When he bites that guy's face, that's just as terrifying in The Dark Knight as when the Joker puts that fucking pencil through the guy's head. Like, that's terrifying when he just attacks him like that.
Your nose could be... What do you mean by that?
And the fact that, like, even when he's trying to be nice to people, he's got this like sinister sort of like, He's got that he's got like a darkness to him. And I'd also say the most slept on performance, easily performance in the movie, is fucking Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken actually, like, I thought was pretty fucking good in that role. I even thought it suited. All he does is Christopher Walken. He just all the fucking Christopher Walkenisms. Like, but it sort of allows him to be like, he can be stern. He can be like a man of the people. He can be a bit unhinged and a bit quixotic, you know. I thought that actually all worked great. So there were elements I did think were good. The problem is almost every other element isn't even just not good. It's sometimes actively bad / harmful to the movie and the premise of the movie. So let's do it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I think like the cinematography deserves some shout outs, like you said, Thorin.
Yeah.
Like they do a very good job by like
shout out Danny Elfman, great job on the soundtrack.
Yeah, Danny Elfman. Yeah. You get some really cool like flyovers of miniatures, like when you're going through the old like abandoned zoo area. Frankly, the penguin habitat set is fucking amazing. Like the scale of that set and what they do with it in terms of people falling in from the roof, all the water around it. is extremely impressive. Even the smaller scale sets really are effective, like Selena Kyle's like all pink apartment with those like steel girders that are going through the middle. Like she's tried to soften this very hard edge of Gotham, because everything about Gotham is just steel and concrete and these like really imposing, terrifying sculptures that remind you of like what would have been kind of in like Nazi Germany at the time, right? And all these very imposing Art Deco elements. So I think all visually this movie actually rules, and a lot of the direction is quite good. It's just that the plot and the writing are so completely terrible.
Well,
The thing is, though, that's what I wanted to just say, though, Richard. One thing I will just say is this, Monty. I can talk about it later, but that's why when you went through the list of things that don't make sense, first of all, I think some of them do make sense in the plot, but also it is a comic. That would be like asking, like, well, how does Superman stay up? Like, what's his propulsion? It's like, once you accept the premise he flies, you have to accept he flies, you know? So, like, certain things can be wacky because it's a comic book. So, if they're not just objectively bad, I can forgive certain elements. So, why I actually did want to like this movie. Go on, Richard.
I was just going to say that the hat tip you have to give actually isn't to Tim Burton. The production design and art direction was handled by a guy called Bo Welsh, a very well-known Hollywood dude. And like I will. Do you remember when we did Lost Boys? You remember how you praised the set design? It's this guy. Ghostbusters 2, Beetlejuice, Joe versus the Volcano. This guy. He did Men in Black. This guy's a fucking bona fide legend at sort of scooping what's in a director's head and getting it, onto film. Now, unfortunately, like a lot of greats, he's a bit of a hack now. But he did do Thor, Kenneth Branagh's Marvel movie, which I have a soft spot for. I think it's unfairly maligned. But look. You're absolutely on point, the pair of you. The way this movie looks, it's got this, it brings Gotham to life in a way, that really, you can imagine the storyboards. And if you've read the comics, and I wouldn't lay claim, say I've read every Batman comic, but when I think of Gotham in my mind, obviously, outside of the comic book medium, I think Tim Burton actually did nail Gotham. I don't think Nolan, because he's going for a much more gritty realism, he doesn't make Gotham the star of the show. It's almost incidental. Yep. But the point is, if you've been brought up on the comics, the Gotham setting is so key and crucial to every little aspect. It is that, there's Dickensian elements in the original conceptualization of Gotham. Yes. It is a city that has the haves and the have-nots, sort of jostling, together. A lot of the original stories from the Golden Age are framed in that way. Indeed, the Penguin was one of them. The origin about him having, wealthy parents was, like, a lot of them retconned in because, Batman was initially just, here's a wacky villain with a gimmick, and they slowly build them up over time. That's how a lot of these villains work. It's hard to believe the Joker was meant to be a throwaway henchman. He's one of the most iconic villains in all media now, But anyway, Gotham itself has always been really key to Batman. Batman exists in the shadows. Criminals are terrified of him. He could be anywhere. Those iconic shots, and again, the animated series nailed this as well, where Batman is just on top of a building staring down at a crime-riddled city in a silhouette, almost like a gargoyle. Is he even real? Those things are super important to Batman as a medium. And I will say this, yes, this movie's looks do hold up, but I am only talking about setting there. I think once we start falling off that and we start analyzing costume design, man alive. This is where we start to have problems, because I don't understand the weird sexual undercurrent in this movie. I don't know why Michelle Pfeiffer has to have
I might have an angle for you.
Okay, well, good. No, so
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah,
go on,
let's start there. Actually, there is a weird, needless
I've got it for you.
BDSM fetish angle in this film. I don't get.
Are you ready? Finally,
I
I get to do Richard Lewis. Are you ready? I'm going to do what Richard does in every movie. I'm going to bring in a psychosexual social dynamic behind the movie that may never have been intended, that I'm going to now force you all to agree is real. So you know what Monty was like? So then she falls, and then she's dying, and then it's not just like the orgy. They all start biting her, and then the idea is somehow they infuse like a vampire into her blood. It's kind of like the vampire story. They give her the powers of a cat. So spoiler, Monty, she doesn't train kung fu. The idea is a cat naturally has insane agility. There's a reason why so many kung fu poses, yoga, are all based on imitating animals. They know like efficiency of movement. So that's why it makes sense that she would have these powers. It is a comic book movie. And then this whole the angle that you guys are missing on, like, why would it be like BDSM? And why would there be this sexual thing? And why does she like hate Batman, but then she doesn't hate him, right? Here's the thing. First of all, if you listen to the dialogue between when she's Catwoman and when she's Selena Kyle, simultaneously, she's doing this parallel thing where they're hopping between Batman and thing. They're trying to make it cutesy, like a rom-com. Also aged way worse than I thought. Terrible dialogue. When you see that, what you'll find is this, right? Two things. One, on the human level, it is essentially like a mainstream proto-feminist I would say like thought exercise, because remember, some of the dialogue is like, you know, come away with me and live in my mansion with me, and then you can get away from all of this. Yeah. At the beginning, you're just a secretary. Oh, she's just a silly secretary, isn't she? You know, she'll never have any position. Everyone's laughing at her. She'll never make it in life. All the people calling her on the phone, like, use this new perfume. It'll make men care about you. And then it's like the things of like, oh, you know, like this person. And so it's all about like the modern woman's plight, right? And she's trying to break free of the chains of traditional values and what the role models of a woman are. And she's given up everything and moved out here to the city to make it. And she's trying to be a 90s feminist, right? And so she's against all of this idea. But notice at the end, when you get that last moment of humanity, you know, the thing where, you know, the Darth Vader, he's dying in the mask, so he has the humanity, or the Hulk has the transfer. Oh, sorry about that. Like, before you die, you have to say essentially the thing you're supposed to. So at the end, she even goes like, Bruce, I wish I could have gone away with you to live in your mansion or whatever. It's clearly she's battling this, right? And Catwoman in some way represents her like unbridled, like what her actual like instincts would be, or like the other part of her personality, this hyper feminist aspect. Think about it. She doesn't need a man. She can beat men. All her dialogues about men and what you can do to them, and all, you know, like a guy who's rough or whatever, and all this shit. It's all, well, here's the other angle that then ties back into that. So first of all, she's essentially weaponizing her sexuality as a way to build an identity and have esteem. But then if you flip it and go to the cat angle, I'm not even a cat person. Not obviously related to this movie, but I got this part. I'm amazed that no one found this part. It's one of the first things I thought of, which is one of the weirdest things about cats is they do have this very bizarre sexuality to them. And in fact, a social dynamic. Like, everyone will know, the reason I don't like cats is I like the people that are reliable, loyal, and don't play mind games. A cat does the opposite of all of that. And so you'll notice the people who like cats are essentially people, as far as I can tell, who want like an aloof, fucked up creature that is a dangerous predator and doesn't even consider them to really be its owner or this to be where they live. And then somehow then the fact that like Chad Cat chooses to come to them, chooses to ask to be stroked, is part of their validation. It's the dynamic going on in their brain. Essentially, they all want to be a sub to a cat. A cat is a dominatrix, naturally.
Point,
see, Richard, I'm going straight fire here. Keep going. So then you have this other component, right? Which is a very, very bizarre thing. Now, don't ask why I know this. I just read a lot of weird shit on the internet. So I once stumbled into one of those like Reddit or forums, right? Where people are talking about the sort of things that you only do if you have too much time and you're on the internet. Where someone essentially said, like, if you don't have your animal spayed, is it like morally wrong that they never get to have sex? And so people might know, look, if you do the dog angle, everyone's going to fucking throw their lunch up and go mental. But there are a lot of weird people who do think that like it's perfectly fine, for example, to masturbate a cat. And what they said you do is you take like a Q-tip and you just like rub it around the right area until it sort of gets off, right? And then their logic was, this is why I didn't say what type of people this would be. What type of person would have loads of cats? I didn't say who it was because I'm very careful nowadays. But that's sort of a nutter. They themselves might be a little bit sexually pent up and not had any experience. You know what? So I can imagine why it would make sense to them, because in the modern day, we all know people don't have animals. They have replacements for children that they then identify with like a human and say stupid things like, but maybe a dog doesn't want to be inside a cage. It's like, that's what you wouldn't want, you idiot. No one knows what a dog would want. It's a dog's mind. So then there's this angle. They said, though, a bit like, I've heard this is also the similar thing when you stroke them. If you scratch a cat, right? You know, if you scratch a cat, I've heard it's the same as this problem they said you had if you masturbated it. They said part of it moves away. It withdraws. It doesn't, it's trying to get away, but then another part's pulling in. Another part, but keep doing that. It's like if you scratch anyone, by the way, they'll have this weird thing because it's a very vulnerable feeling. It's very intimate to have someone access your like nerves and that. So I've heard. So in that sense, think about her dynamic with Batman. Her dynamic with Batman is sort of like
just fit into the writing of the two characters.
It's like,
the weird
it's
little,
like,
and
the weird
two
little
elements.
Yeah.
One, that no man can ever actually dominate her because she's Catwoman. She's got 9 lives and super fucking powers and she's shitting on everyone now. And they're all losers. But Batman is just fucking alpha Chad guy, isn't he? He's the one who's actually willing to like, he even does an actual 40s style film noir backhand slap onto her. And then she goes, but I'm a woman. And then he gets wrecked by it. So there's the whole thing where he's the only one, first of all, who's chadding her. And then secondly, it's this aspect that it's the push pull. On the one hand, she's like, go away, but don't go away and come after me. And then you'll find me, will you? Oh, why didn't you save me? I don't need saving from you. It's this whole like thing. So to me, I think I've nailed it, mate. Whether it was ever rare or not, I think
that's actually good.
Altogether, there you go.
I also think that Michelle Pfeiffer does an excellent job of playing into those elements, because you can see that, like, one of the best things I think about her performance is that, especially when she has the mask off and is Selena Kyle, she herself is confused by her transformation, and you see that on her face constantly. And I think
she was a lot better than Selena Kyle than Catwoman, though.
Yes, for sure. But I mean, she was told to ham it up, I'm sure, as Catwoman. I mean,
fair enough.
I'm sure, like, obviously, like, she's playing into it, but I do think that her performance actually has quite a bit of range in this film, and her, like, she actually plays a pretty complete character arc from the beginning to the end, with quite a huge amount of character development over that process. So I actually think she's quite good in this movie.
Who the hell do you think you are?
I don't know anymore, Bruce.
The thing is, I've left $350 on the table by not writing an article for like Motherboard, like why Batman Returns is a proto-feminist, like, you know, core tenet or something. That's like a 1,000-word article right there. That's all I get.
But you know, look, in the 90s, obviously that was when we were kind of getting that new wave of feminism that was kind of happening in a lot of media, and I do recall distinctly, actually, you know, she was sort of held up as like one of the original girl bosses or whatever. I don't know if I don't know if it's really aged that well.
Not really. It's a bit clunky, right?
Yeah. But here's what I will say.
The implication, if you think about it, Richard, is on the one hand, she is girl bossing. But like I say, when she's dying and sort of gets a moment of lucidity, she goes, no, I do just want to live in a mansion. Like, in a way, that look, I feel like the feminist edit would have to take that out, surely. Come on, take that out. The director's fault.
Yeah, but also as well, I think, you know, the like you said, the dialogue is dreadful. She says things like, you know, when she gets that guy who's going to rape that woman. Yep. And that's just a weird fucking scene, by the way, to put in a Batman film.
It happened. Okay.
Yeah, they're like, so, but just so, again, like, you're like, Richard, this film sounds mental. There is a literal scene where a rapist pulls a woman down an alley and starts unbuckling his flies. And I guess he's just going to get away with it because Batman ain't in town. But then Catwoman, a newly, you know, birthed Catwoman, turns up in the full BDSM gear, carves his face up with her claws, beats him up, and the woman goes, oh, thank you. and then she chastises the woman for having the temerity to be out after midnight. Like, what is this? Like, guys, so there's these like weird moments where you go, oh yeah, she's meant to be a feminist icon, but that is written by a dude. Like, clearly. So yeah, I mean, I'll also add on performance, I think, Michelle Pfeiffer, she I won't go as far as to say she got lemons and made lemonade, because you can't make lemonade out of this script.
She got handed the worst lines in the movie.
I feel so sorry for her, because I mean, if you think about where she was in her career coming out of the 80s, I mean, dude, she had a real tough time of it. Remember, she was in the universally despised sequel to Grease. She played the coked up bitch in Scarface. She was in commercial flop Lady Hawk, and realistically, she didn't get in kind of like mainstream, acceptance until The Witches of Eastwick, which was a huge 80s film that again was about feminist. It was this new wave of feminism, late 80s, early 90s, new wave of feminist movies. It was literally about a bunch of witches, the titular witches of Eastwick, coming together to overthrow their male overlord, which was played by Jack Nicholson. It's actually a legit film. She went on to do like Dangerous Liaisons, Frankie and Johnny. She did these big rom-coms, and then she served up Batman Returns, and man alive, this she had to wear that full body PVC suit the entire time. She literally said, by the way, it was hell on earth. She literally said it was like being, because she is poured into that suit.
She's just wearing a fucking gimp suit essentially for the whole movie. She's wearing it, but also it's not a forgiving gimp mask. I mean, if she ate an extra fucking sandwich for dinner, right, it wouldn't have fit. And so that scene where she goes, I think I'll take a bath.
Yeah. I mean, dude. So like,
it's
for real.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that, by the way. I wrote down that line because it was so bad, Thor. The full line is, the thought of busting Batman makes me feel all dirty. Maybe I'll give myself a bath right now. And then she starts licking herself like a cat.
Maybe I'll just give myself a bath right here.
By the way, I have some quotes. I have quotes. I always write down a good quote, and I'll present them intentionally out of context. So you're going to think you're just manipulating it, being silly. I bet in the movie it made sense. No, it's just as bad now as in the movie. Here's two quotes. Unlimited poontang.
Yep.
That's said. It's a serious line, by the way. Then later in the movie, Batman, think how cool Batman's supposed to be. If you here's the thing again, you know what? Apologies to Christian Bale. I have banged on your Batman so much about that shit voice and about how you didn't get the cat. You know what? At least you didn't go eat floor, high fiber.
I haven't been fed all day.
Eat floor. High fiber.
Yeah.
That's delivered as though it was a dope line, by the way. That's a real line in this movie.
Yeah. No, the dialogue is especially bad, and and very bizarre from like you said at the start, Duncan. It's so far behind. Like visually, this is Golden Age Batman, but that stuff. Well, actually, technically Silver Age Batman, but the dialogue is like 1920s almost. It's like it's so bad. It's where the dialogue was essentially like an afterthought to the images.
The thing, Rich, this is why I don't think Tim Burton's read comics. There's people who don't know that the 60s Batman show is an intentional satire of comic books. They think it's real. So when he's going pow biff, they intentionally did that to be stupid. That's not the point. Is comics were like that in the 40s. By even the 70s, you have brilliant writers coming out of England and places that are doing serious. Already years before we got rid of that. So the idea in 1992, you really still think it's Biff Pow Boff Whistle? No, that's you're so far out of it. I agree that it's very jarring because I feel like it's an excuse to have bad dialogue.
They didn't even really do that in the first one as well. That's what's bizarre about it.
It wasn't a talk like that.
Yeah.
If you had told me that the dialogue in this movie was written by a literal 12-year-old who was trying to make Adam West Batman sexy, I would believe you.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that is a good point, because this does have more in common with Adam West TV series Batman than sort of anything that comes after it. I mean, the camp levels are off the charts, and I say that I haven't watched them for a while, so I might be wrong. Kind of feel this is up there with the Schumacher era Batman's, actually, in terms of just silly camp buffoonery. Yeah. And Joel Schumacher deliberately did that, because we've talked about that's who he is. You can't.
This actually ties back. It's actually it adds to your theory that's just Tim Burton unchecked, because the first movie has the Joker be a bit wacky, and even then, by the way, that's way more in sort of the Dick Tracy being wacky than it is this now. But every other angle is a serious movie. That's what makes it good. And by the way, Kim Basinger got way more to work with than fucking Michelle Pfeiffer. I agree. Actually, now I used to pair these two movies together. The first one, I have to go rewatch it, but I feel like the first one's way better than this one now.
Oh, I mean, for sure. And it's one of those rare instances of where probably studio interference kept it on the fucking rails. That's the frightening thing. Because, look, when I was doing all the research for this, and I got a ton of stuff, like, we'll have to get, I hope we got time for it. But, for example, this movie actually did have a huge controversy surrounding it.
Hold up. Before we get there, I want to just put out the worst line of dialogue in this movie, which is uttered by the Penguin when he said, "I was their number one son, but they treated me like number two."
True. I was their number one son, and they treated me like number two.
Yeah, what is that?
It's funny.
What is that? Yeah, because obviously, because he was flushed down the sewer, he's referring to a poo. Yeah, I know, it's dreadful. But no, just to put a pin in the sexuality thing as well. I mean, like the fucking weird incel interactions with the Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer's character.
He's simping for like a motherfucker, isn't he? Yeah,
bro, like just full on, like he's literally like with his fish breath, he's just eating fish. He's like just like that. Yeah, go on. Would you? It's like touch it, look at it, like oh my god, it's like a Harvey Weinstein documentary. It's so fucking bad.
We need to talk.
I just can't. It's so tonally inappropriate. It's actually tonally inappropriate for. I mean, this movie was a 15. This is the interesting part. Like when it came out. So obviously, 15-year-old. On VHS, you're not gonna. It didn't make the cut to be on the PG side, and it's like there's this weird, aggressive, just awful sexuality throughout the movie. I'd probably say the only scene as it pertains to the sexual undercurrent in the film, the only scene that's actually kind of intelligent is after Catwoman and Batman have had a fight with each other. They not grievously, but they seriously wound each other. But then the character of Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne get together and they're trying to make out. And as their hands are rubbing over each other's body, they're touching the wounds that they gave each other in the previous night's fight and trying to skirt around it and ignore it. And that's kind of interesting. There's something there, probably some meta commentary about, our double lives and, in
all that shit.
Yeah. So there's something there, but the rest of it is like. It's cringe is the word. I mean, this is cringe sexuality for frigid people. It is.
I know you've nailed it. When you said it's like it's written by like a 12-year-old or something. That's why I thought this part of the movie was the shit when you were a kid, like the Batman and Booth. But that's because you were a kid. You didn't know about sexuality and real human adult relationships. This is a child's image of what it would be like. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. To be a playboy, and again, like the idea about fucking, she has to wear this, hypersexualized BDSM costume, and it's like that's not what BDSM is. I mean, I think there was this weird trend in the 80s and 90s where a lot of movies were trying to push the envelope with, because that was where, S&M kind of became a bit more, came out of the shadows and became a bit more mainstream, and Hollywood wanted to put it in. There were a lot of movies that were about exploring your sexuality and pushing limits. I mean, Hellraiser, is a good example. And that works. This doesn't. This is like a moron's idea of like what fetishization is, what leather fetishes are. And it's like, I don't know. It makes me wonder if Tim Burton it ever even had sex at this point. Like it's just so
I like that story
whack.
I told you earlier, where Kevin Smith sort of, as far as I can tell, never got to maybe even meet Tim Burton. He just went through a producer. The joke is, and he even said when he went to this producer's mansion, it was like going to Wayne Manor. I actually get the vibe that Tim Burton himself became some sort of a Howard Hughes-esque figure who's withdrawn for some great genius artist in the ivory tower in the eras when they will pay you the hundreds of millions and all. And he just comes out like Prince. That's why I can see where they vibe with each other. Or fucking Johnny Depp, and then they just come out every now and then to do their little art for the world, and then they fuck back off to whatever mega pints they're having and all that shit back home. So to me, that's the joke. Is this also shows to me that Tim Burton has to make weird movies because he's not in touch with reality. He doesn't know what like normal life is like or a line of dialogue.
Yeah, and it's sad because, like, listen, it's not that I hate Tim Burton. I mean, I want to make this clear. I think, like, as a visionary director, I guess he's like maybe the closest analog to like a Terry Gilliam or something, in the sense that you look at the movie and you know who the director is immediately. And like Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a legit film. Beetlejuice is a legit film. Edward Scissorhands is a legit film. Ed Wood is a fucking banger film. And honestly, I didn't hate Sleepy Hollow, actually.
I actually like Sleepy Hollow. I actually like Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. And I'll say, I think Big Fish is actually
Big Fish is really good.
Movie.
Big Fish is really good.
Yeah. So between, like, what's that, like 85 and like 2001, 2002, like, he made incredible films that actually had a huge, profound impact on culture. And that's before we get into all the ancillary stuff, like, Nightmare Before Christmas and what have you. I think the problem, unfortunately, is it's one of those choices. It's one of those artistic directions that is kind of limited, and by the time we get to like Corpse Bride and fucking Frankenweenie and all that garbage, unfortunately it's like it's been done. Tim Burton isn't capable of reinventing himself, but there is a window where I think he's a really, really good director. I think Edward Scissorhands is a beautiful film. I really do.
Also, we could have done that as a much better Christmas film, by the way.
That's your fault. And so,
that was all our fault. All of us thought this movie was better than it was.
That is fair. I agree.
We did all co-sign it, but what started it is what Monty just did 15 seconds ago, where he hears a movie, he remembers watching it when he was 14, and goes, "That's a brilliant movie." And that is how these movies get on this list right now. That's I'm telling you right now.
It's true.
There's no vetting process. It's just our memories.
Basically, Batman Returns is the Mark Merrill of foreplay.
Exactly.
It got the Lifetime Achievement Award. No, but anyway, look. So just to put a pin in the dialogue talk, and then we'll get into some other stuff. I mean, this is it literally is a comic book movie. Bringing to life one of the best comic book characters that there's ever been, with this rich history to draw from, and none of it is touched. Not dialogue, not plot. Because I'll tell you, I know even their use of the Penguin is abysmal. Because if you read the comics, the Penguin was a gang boss that they then added affectations to, like with the umbrella and the poison, and he was quite tricky. He was in and out of prison, and then he went on to be like essentially like a a fixer, I guess. He would do jobs for hire for other figures. The idea of him running for mayor is sort of crazy and not within his wheelhouse at all. In fact, I was kind of like, and again, I could be wrong on this. I got a ton of Batman comics behind me, by the way, and I was like, kind of like having a look. In the New 52, which of course is like, you know, I mean, it's years old now, but it was the DC reboot. That was when he got to be mayor of Gotham. That was never even explored in any of these, you know, pre-90s era comics, because that wasn't who he is. He wasn't a guy that wanted to, he couldn't, by definition of how he looked and how awful he was, he couldn't weave through the world of politics. What he really was good at doing was being a crime boss and underboss, you know, and being quite malevolent in the types of crimes he would commit. He was a thief. He was a cat burglar, ironically, is how he got his start. He used to heist pieces of art and break into museums and that kind of classic thing. So this story is like, oh, I'm going to take one of Batman's iconic villains and tell a story about how he runs for office. Are you fucking joking? Are you joking? Like, you know, what? Imagine if the Joker had fucking applied for a fucking Subway franchise or something in the original movie, you know, like, I'm gonna run a sandwich shop, and you're like, what this is garbage. Like, it is a garbage premise from the get-go, and wastes a lot of what you could have done with the character. Yeah, it's just a terribly written film, like, really is bad. And as I said at the start, Batman isn't in this film. If you I bet, Duncan, if you add it up, I bet he's not even on screen for 20 minutes in this 2-hour movie.
I mean, that's what's so crazy about it, is it really is just Penguin and Catwoman almost the entire movie. And then Batman, it's like Bruce Wayne is there.
Long scenes.
Bruce
when
Wayne
Catwoman trashes her apartment, I timed it. That scene is like 6 minutes. Why? Oh, I get it. Girl boss coming out. Ooh, S&M. Ooh, we're partying now. I don't. She's spray. I don't even know that scene where he zooms in and it's her dollhouse, because she was quite twee before the vampiric cat assimilation. And they do a close-up and she spray paints the bed. And I think Tim Burton was like, haha, people will think this is really her room. And then when she spray paints it, they will realize it was a doll's house. That shot never happening. It wasn't Hereditary, mate. It was fucking clearly a doll's house. Why? Why have you done that? Why am I watching any of this? Why is Batman not on my screen right now? Like, it's a Batman film without Batman. It's mental. Like, it's so, honestly, you know, the tagline for this film was like, the bat, the cat, and the penguin. And it's like, no, you do understand villains are the second, like, a great villain, right? When you make a movie, I always have problems with superhero movies when they do threes. You know, it's like when Spider-Man 3 did Sandman and Venom. Well, you're selling both of them short, right? Like, you ain't got time to juggle all these. You always fuck it up if you do that. Should have just been the Penguin. Catwoman shouldn't even be in this film. Or, you know, it's Batman Returns and the Penguin's not in it, and it's about Catwoman. Pick your poison.
It always happens this way, though. People forget about The Dark Knight because all of the Heath Ledger scenes are great, but they forget all of the absolutely shit Two-Face scenes that are in that movie.
Yeah,
it's because they're trying to play, like you say, with the dynamic of like Catwoman's playing both of them. So on the one hand, you do have sort of like the super terminally online loser who is the Danny DeVito character, who the joke is, I mean, he doesn't even need her. He's got all his own prison gang set up. But the thing that he's into is she's got him wrapped around her finger, hasn't she? She's got him eating out the palm of her hand. Then she's got Batman, who obviously it's always alluded to. Like, the problem with Batman is he can never actually reveal the truth, because who can he get close to and who would understand his lifestyle and accept it, etc. So here's the one person who would. They keep actually very heavy-handedly bashing you over the head with the fact that we're both damaged people. Maybe we can sort of both get along or whatever. It's like, bro, she's literally killing people all the time, but let's just ignore that and pretend it can be redeemed. There's that whole component to it, I think. Here's the thing I want to say, though, Richard. I think that dollhouse scene and the whole feminist angle is another detail people will miss. This is why, unfortunately, it was inappropriate for Tim Burton to do a mainstream movie like this, because all of Tim Burton's movie is about the weird, the quixotic, the unusual. Yeah. I would even use the word, now it means nothing, queer. Just the idea of
Yeah.
something that's a
Yeah.
bit off. And if you notice, all of his other movies, all the great ones you just listed, first of all nearly almost have like an element of, you would even, in the modern day, you just use sexuality as the thing. Don't think what's currently going on in the world. That would be the domain. Instead, it's like suburbia, and it's things like, oh, there's a weirdo kid, and what would that be like for him? Oh, and Pee-wee, isn't he so unusual and camp? But in theory, he's not actually gay. He's actually totally straight, and he's just he's almost like a British eccentric. He's just some crazy one-off figure. So to me, I always thought there was almost like an influence from like John Waters movies or something in like the work of Tim Burton, because it's about taking this, like the classic American stereotype of this is normality, this is the 2.4 kids, and it's about like either showing you think there's a darker element or perverting it a bit and taking it. So when I see the doll's house and I see her take apart her life and ruin it, to me, there's elements of that. She's trying to like cast this off. Sadly, I'm making that sound way better than it is in the movie. That's the problem.
You are, yeah.
Whatever I did there deserves way more applaud than fucking what you do. In the movie, it's a bit ham-fisted, like I say.
Yeah. It's gotten a little... like Tim Burton's movies, when they're good, there is an element almost like Blue Velvet.
Yes.
In the sense that it is a very often... you as the audience, or perhaps a protagonist in the movie that is a substitute for the audience, you're right, you're being exposed to something that is very much on the outside and uncomfortably so. And so, you think about Edward Scissorhands, I mean, very straightforward, reimagining.
Also, features PVC as the outfit. I'll just put that out there. I took that as obvious callback.
Another aspect where there is a fetish element to it, but Beetlejuice as well, like Beetlejuice he has this crass sexuality about him. He's always grabbing his crotch and licking people and stuff.
That could be the penguin right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I get Tim Burton's application of these ideas. I totally fuck with it in every other film. The problem is they just didn't make the world of Batman mesh with it. And that's what I find so crazy, because ultimately, like the camp elements of the Adam West era TV show, they give you gold. If you're Tim Burton, right? Yeah, this should be a layup for you, but it isn't. He really doesn't nail it tonally. And as I said, it comes across as, watching it, I was like, again, nothing's going to make me uncomfortable. I'm like you, I'm hardcore fucking internet era, you know what I mean? So like, obviously, it just, it's just weird. It just feels, I had this sort of almost like nausea.
I think what happens is that where it falls apart is that you get these like really blatantly sexual lines. Like, I don't know, I wrote some of them down, like, just the pussy I've been looking for, and I'd like to fill her void. You know what I mean? And it's like, dude, because the movie is so campy, to have like really directly sexual lines like that combined with the campiness just puts you in a very strange mood. Because to me,
it's the weird thing though. I go on.
No, it just feels like tonal whiplash as you're going between the campiness and then just like kind of direct, unfiltered sexuality a lot of the time. It's weird.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
It's chilly in here.
I'll warm you.
To me, he painted himself in no corner on that, though, because this is a thing that I actually do get really mad about when people review movies or talk about old movies, is when they'll act like, for example, if a character said the N-word, that's terrible, because for anyone to ever say the N-word is evil. But what if the character is one where that establishes something about them, and maybe they are even doing evil things in the era of slavery? It's actually at that point almost essential that they say it. In fact, the fact you disagree and think it is evil is that's actually like the feature, not the bog, idiot. So I would say the problem here is, as you say, Richard, you have fucked the whole Penguin's character up by trying to make a Tim Burton fantastical creation, like out of a fantasy movie. Because if you were someone who had grown up outside of society with a bunch of penguins and clowns, and you were some pervert who ate fish and just looked up through the sewers, do you think you would go up to women and go, "Excuse me, miss, this might be a bit forward"? But no, you would probably be some really weird character like a terminally online person who was like, can I get that pussy? You would be this way. But the problem with that is, why is this character in the movie? Do you know what I mean? That's the part. It's actually totally on point for the character. It's just it's shit in this movie. Like, the funny thing is, if you'd actually done the Penguin that Richard's describing, the suave upper class one with the monocle, you could have actually played it a totally different way. You could have had him be sort of the upper class person, giving like the sort of clever innuendo or something like that, or implying to her, like, because then you could do the thing of like, does she choose like the powerful guy or the earnest? You could do a whole thing with it. They didn't though. Again, there's always these possibilities, and they're not even, they're going for the lowest hanging fruit possible.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, let me also say I'm super surprised at how bad a written film it is. I don't know if you have a soft spot for Heathers, the film Heathers.
Really?
I do.
It's all right.
I like it. I mean, you know, Golden Era, Christian Slater and Winona Ryder. That was my jam. I always had a soft spot for Heathers. It's by the same dude. It's by that. You know, that script wasn't cringe and has some of the most quotable lines out of 80s movies of all time, and sort of. You know, it's the same guy. I just don't understand what happened. And well, I do understand what happened. The studio said to Tim Burton, "You have final say on everything," and you can't listen. Oh God, it annoys me so much as well, because you nailed it right at the start. Yes, he does pay tribute to Citizen Kane in this movie. The Third Man. There's all these like references to all these great films, and it's like. This is the movie you're doing that in. This is the movie that pays tribute to fucking The Third Man, Citizen Kane. Like, you can't be serious, mate.
Yes,
you can't be serious. It's
Tim Burton is. Tim Burton has the hubris to think in his stupid comic book.
Exactly.
Movie, he's going to give an homage to Orson Welles.
Yes, I know. It's so. It's just so bad. Like,
wouldn't piss on this movie if it was on fire. Understand that, please, everyone.
Definitely wouldn't. He'd rather do another frozen peas commercial. It is a fucking joke. But so anyway, let's talk about the controversies. Do you want to get into some controversies?
I've got 2 quick points to do. I've got 2 points. This is my other 2 I've written down. So one, I need to again correct Monty, because this is the correcting Monty segment of the show. So bringing this back, you know when Monty said how it doesn't make any sense why he would want to be elected, and they do that whole. That part I actually thought even the dialogue explains. Again, a character is born. He was from the family of an upper class family. He has gone to essentially the lowest possible class, where he is ugly, a complete outsider on society. And if anyone saw him, they would scream, they would run the other way. He is disgusting, repulsive, and he actually is that internally as well. He knows he's a piece of shit. That's why essentially he's working from resentment and anger. So the Max Schreck character, like I said, actually the best part of the movie, Christopher Walken, basically is a guy. It's like he's like fucking Donald Trump. It's all about getting the deal done. It's about business, isn't it? Everything's about business. That character's even, the motivations of that character even very well done. It's all about like pragmatic, extreme, fast decision making, which is what all the great businessmen supposedly do. They're risk takers, but they just make the decision and they do what needs to be done to get to where they want to get to. He tries to sway the Penguin. What can he offer the Penguin, right? All he has is status and power. And the Penguin has his own underworld power and his own access to money and whatever he wants. So what he sways him with is this idea of, right, what we're going to do is, I understand how the public work. I'm giving speeches like that where I'm doing it off the cuff like this and I'm fire. Everyone's loving my shit. In fact, I've tricked them all that I'm a benevolent hero when actually I'm a piece of shit. Where, as you say, the hilarious part, one of the funniest concepts ever, is that he's building a power plant that that subtracts power rather. I don't even know how that would work. I don't even know how that would work rather than adds it. Nothing about it except
it's a capacitor that stores it. Yeah.
It's a stupid comic book idea. That's a funny idea. I'll give them that. I'll give them a pass on that one. And also, by the way, as an aside, because it's the 90s and every villain in the 90s was a corrupt businessman, he's literally dumping green toxic waste like the Ninja Turtles, just bizarre, like for no reason whatsoever. So that's all. They're all some classic tropes from the 90s. And then he lures him with the idea, we'll present you in the right way, and actually people will embrace you. They will lift you up. They will love you. And that's why he then shows him this scene where, you know what, when you get into politics, mate, and people start to like you, women fall over you, and they even ignore or can't see. I could insert a certain line about what they might let you do. They all of a sudden, they're open to this degeneracy. They don't even see him that way. They're viewing him like, remember, in that scene when he's in that office, like when they're going to do the campaign, he's eating a raw fish and he looks disgusting. But even then, those women are like, oh, hey, I'm a big fan of you. Like, you're really great. And then he sort of realized, yeah, I'd like to fill that part. And they're not even hearing it, though. That it's almost like a commentary on what political life's like, by the way, and how you buy into the ideal and you ignore all the dirty, seedy underbelly. So that part I thought was a really clever angle, because it was the idea of that's the only reason why this would like draw it all out into the open and why the Penguin would try to go public. Otherwise, why would he ever need to? He could just stay as a shadowy underworld boss his whole career, do whatever he wants. He would have even won, wouldn't he? So I thought that part did actually have a logic to it as to why he would want the ultimate valor. Because remember, his initial motivation was find out who his parents are, and they say, like, find out why they did it. I thought the implication was probably kill him or do something horrible to him. When he finds out they're dead, very clumsy, fucking obvious parallel to Batman himself, even though, like, so obviously, he's even at a grave, like, bloody hell, like, give me a break. Then, obviously, at that point, what do you have left that you could be given in this world? How could the devil tempt you with validation from society? You will be a great man. You will be considered, and then you will have your legacy. I actually thought that angle didn't even play that badly. As usual, the movie is shit, so this is all just neither here nor there. But I do think there was an internal logic to that for me.
Well, so I mean, look, this movie, I didn't remember this, but obviously I would have been a kid, so it wouldn't have happened to me. But this movie stirred up a huge controversy in 1992. And the movie was condemned as being, in the New York Times, as being vehemently anti-Semitic, right? No joke, right? I know.
I never would have put that together.
Well,
exactly.
Let me try and guess why.
Okay. The Penguin,
because of the Penguin being like Moses. Is this the whole thing?
I'm gonna guess the angle. He looks like a weird, fucked up stereotype, and some swarthy in his nose.
Look like that.
Yeah, it's gonna be, isn't it? It's gonna be that angle.
So let me. This is how much times have changed. If you go to the New York Times archive on July 2nd, 1992, you will find an article written by two film critics. And the entire premise of the piece is that this is, and apparently I didn't even know this, but Tim Burton is like he's got German origin or something. So they were nailing him.
There we go. Okay, there we go.
him on that one. But like, so without reading the article, I literally cannot read this article because some of the stuff that is in it is so out of pocket. But basically, they say the Penguin is essentially, comparable to Happy Merchant, which is what you're referencing, Duncan. Nazi era cartoon propaganda about the Jews. The Moses thing, obviously, the fact that they take that Old Testament myth and then subvert it, arguably pervert it.
Killing the spawn, all that,
One paragraph I will read is, as a mayoral candidate, the Penguin claims he will save Gotham from corruption and violence. The Penguin feigns assimilation into society and gains the citizens' trust for a time, but eventually the ignorant masses understand he is a false prophet and a primordial beast who seeks retribution. An eye for an eye, he says. This Old Testament saying is heard in different forms throughout the movie. This is not how Jews govern themselves, but it is the way others have often perceived Judaism. And so
it's like this guy doesn't know he's writing effective propaganda for the other side.
Well, no one even came up with that angle. Wait till I hit you with the punchline.
Oh, come on.
So the other thing is Max Schreck, Christopher Walken's character, Max Schreck.
The name sounds like it could be.
Well, Max Schreck is the actor who played Nosferatu.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, there you go. So we get into that whole vampiric stuff again.
Right.
And anyway, so this came out. Then the New York Times published replies to the piece. And I'll just quickly read you this. This is someone basically said, anti-Semitism in Batman Returns, be serious. This is gratuitous bigotry. This was on July 20th, so 18 days later. And basically somebody wrote in and said, I thought these bloody bleeding out liberals were just making it up. But then I watched the movie and I couldn't believe my eyes at how anti-Semitic it was. So the New York Times did this sustained campaign as the movie was released, essentially publishing article upon article saying it was anti-Semitic. Here's the thing. The person that worked on the script doctor for it,
Hit me with it.
Was
Jesus,
indeed
really, or
Jewish.
something?
Yeah, he was.
Jewish, there you go.
Right. And so
I
he
knew it
was
was coming.
a chap called Wesley Strick. And he had to come out after the Times. Fair play, because it was the 90s and sort of journalism still had some value back then. The Times published an article by him responding to the controversy where he said, I came up with all of the stuff about the political plot and everything that he did, and I'm Jewish. And basically, if you think this is anti-Semitic, it is a Rorschach test to see if you are indeed an anti-Semite.
That's a good line.
Good
line.
So it actually sort of all died off. But this is actually a movie that, at the time it caught a lot of fucking heat. It had some stuff with PETA as well, the ethical treatment of animals, guys, because there was some stories that leaked about the penguins. They used real
they clearly
penguins.
used real penguins for a lot of this film, which was actually very impressive.
Yeah. But this movie was like immediately embroiled in a bunch of bullshit. I mean, keep in mind, it was a summer release. You're getting hit with that stuff, in July in peak season. And yeah, it was like just a bizarrely controversial movie out of nowhere. When, of course, obviously the first movie was a commercial and critical darling that had none of this. And so it's kind of interesting. It starts out strong. I think it broke the record for it's one of the highest ever opening days for a movie, Batman Returns. But it actually didn't even make as much money as many of the other movies that were released in '92.
Wow.
It only made something like, hang on, I got the numbers here.
That's Richard says. I even remember when you would go, and the thing as a kid was you wanted to get these, they had special cups that you got from McDonald's or some shit like that. That was fucking one of those plastic ones instead. I can actually do it now instead of recycling. So home cup or whatever. Yeah, it was the dope shit,
when it came out, its opening weekend was above Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
There you go.
Which is insane, because think about that movie.
Super fast or something, I'm guessing.
But then movies that outgrossed it in '92, like Lethal Weapon 3, The Bodyguard, Home Alone 2, Basic Instinct, and these movies all clear it by about 100 million.
Right.
In terms of gross. So I think there was this weird thing that just happened with this film where it was released, it was highly anticipated. Everyone went in week one, and then it gets hit with anti-Semitism. It gets hit with animal cruelty. It got hit with pretty bad reviews, actually, looking at some of these. Our boy Roger Ebert, who is ultimately the fourth horseman of this podcast from Beyond the Grave. I just love how wrong he is all the fucking time. God bless you. He gave this movie 2 stars, and I think he's generous. But it didn't get good reviews, and and funnily enough, a lot of the positivity was about performance, and Christopher Walken was praised in a lot of the reviews, even in the negative reviews, and Danny DeVito. But after that, not a lot of critics had good things to say about the film. It was a big disappointment for a variety of reasons. So where do we go now, Monty? How are we tying all of these? Tying all of these parts together now?
I think we can wrap this up. I would like to condemn this film to a watery grave in much the same way that the penguin was revived at the end of the movie from falling into the lake, only to then stand up on the island, fall down dead, and then have penguin pallbearers push him into the water as if he is a penguin on an iceberg going face first into the ocean, which I thought was just such a ridiculous visual that is the exact same fate that I would like to consign this movie to. I thought the writing was just so bad. I was deeply disappointed by the fact that they had these epic sets and they had this great cast, and they completely fucked it up. They utterly destroyed this movie from having a shit plot and shit writing, shit dialogue. And it's just, at the end of the day, you just kind of wonder what could this film have been had it had an actual, good scriptwriter or good ideas behind it, because it's one of those things where you feel that all the ingredients were there, but the ultimate dish that you're served at the end is just god awful.
Yeah, and just maybe it was just a timing thing. Like maybe if this movie had been released earlier in the 80s, there's a context with which you can have a different type of appreciation for it. But by 92, some of this stuff is really outdated. I mean, again, to put it into context from a comic book perspective, I think 86 was Frank Miller, Dark Knight Returns, right? It's about then.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, so
which is already essentially like The Dark Knight. That's what they took a lot of it from, yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, this version of Batman is just a relic of a bygone era, and I don't think Tim Burton even particularly nails that framing, that time. It's like it's cringe, it's camp in a bad way, it's aggressively sexual, not in a way that's profound or says anything,
or is pleasurable.
It's yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not even. By the way, everyone's just blue balled in this movie. Let's call it what it is. Like just blue balls returns. Like it's no one's getting any. It's so mental. And it's just sad because up until as I listed all of his movies earlier, all of the pre-2000, all of the pre-Big Fish movies, other than this, I think Tim Burton is a stellar director. He's done incredible work that will live long in the memory. This is pretty much like his modern output. It's throwaway garbage that really has no guardrails. It's just run away, the unfettered stream of consciousness in Tim Burton's head. And that's not a good thing. It just isn't. When you take that iconic imagery and you put structure in it and you put character arcs in it and you put dialogue in it, like again, and it's even cheesy stuff. Like you think about Edward Scissorhands, hold me, I can't. Just very simple words, but iconic sayings that really encapsulate what's going on with the character and the inner pain and all. It's like for tortured souls, early Tim Burton is great. There's none of that here. It is a comic book movie in all the negative connotations of what the comic book medium is. And by the way, there's not even as much Christmas in as you fucking as I remember.
Yeah.
It's like one tree.
Yes.
So why we watch this?
All of the action happens around the lighting of the tree, and then the lighting of the tree the second time. There are. It is a central part of this film.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but it sneaks in. But put it this way: if motherfuckers are still debating whether or not Die Hard is a Christmas movie, there's way more grounds for rejection on this. But yeah, just my final thoughts. I was genuinely shocked at how irredeemably bad this movie was. I think Danny DeVito and Christopher Walken and Michelle Pfeiffer all deserve good job. A little attaboy pep talk for trying to work with this. But this is a movie I never want to see again. And if I could erase it from my memory, I absolutely would. This is a 0 stars stinker. The worst thing we've ever watched on Foreplay by a mile.
Funny thing was, I was about to say that this is a movie I will never watch again in my life unless essentially I am incapacitated in an old person's home and someone forcibly puts it onto the television. That is the only way. Even in prison, I will go to solitary before I see this movie again. It is that bad. And also, here's another thing. This movie is 2 hours long. For people who don't know, some of the movies at the end of the action movie genre we did were 2 hours 10. This fucking drags. Those movies didn't. Even things like Mission Impossible, they handled their running time. This movie sort of holds together the facade for the first quarter, then it gets progressively worse, and the last quarter drags so badly, it is fucking mental. Like at the end of this movie, actually, even though I won't go 0, for real, this is like a 3 or 4 star out of 10 movie though. Like legitimately. Even the good elements are almost like the exception to the rule of how bad the film is. And things like, by the end of the movie, you do just sort of think So unless I essentially get into that like whole theory crafted sexual dynamic I did earlier, what is interesting about this movie? What is interesting about the plot? What was I supposed to actually care about? Because by the end, I don't, like I said, I don't think that just because Bruce Wayne's damaged and can't let women in his life, that you'd still want someone who's just murdering people and doing mass crime because they have a leather fetish suit. Like that's not enough. Like, so to me, it just undercuts everything about Batman. Like I say, I've got to revisit the first one. I feel like it's going to hold up, but like, holy fuck. Essentially, there was one good Batman movie in this era. There was one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at some point, if we do an arc of like truly terrible films, like Batman and Robin probably has to be on that list, because I remember that one just being absolutely horrendous. So I'm not sure if this one is worse than Batman and Robin. Like, that'd be an interesting conversation now that the rose-colored glasses have kind of come off on Batman Returns in many ways, because maybe those movies have aged better than this one. Like, I frankly don't know, because I haven't seen those since they were released either. But yeah, this was a miserable experience.
The reason this is embarrassing, though, is it for real? If you asked me, just going off memory, I would have assumed this is like a 7 out of 10 movie or an 8 out of 10 movie.
Yeah.
Or like it was actually like a sleeper, one of the better comic book movies of it. It's fucking trash. It's actually really bad. And I actually didn't expect. I was actually worried because we all said it was going to be good. I actually was worried that you were all going to think it was awesome.
No chance. But I mean, look, here's what I will definitely say. Like, if you wanted to go and have like a reappraisal of, the Joel Schumacher era Batman movies, the reason they probably hold up better than this one is they set the tone very early, and at least they're tonally consistent. You either fuck with it or you don't.
Like campy and stupid, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and some of the performances in those films, Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face, is it stupid?
Jim Carrey as the Riddler.
Yeah, but are they as stupid as everyone else in the movie? Yes. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. Yes, it's stupid, but everyone is stupid in those films. What's weird about this one is it just goes back and forth, where it's like trying to be serious, and then it's too Burton-esque, and then Danny DeVito's trying to be dark and tortured. I lost my parents, they threw me away. It just doesn't hold up, because they don't know whether they want to make this a fucking comedy, or like other Tim Burton movies, is it an analysis of a tortured outsider? It's just crazy to me, like how much this movie fails across the board. So yeah, unfortunately, for me, dreadful. Didn't enjoy it. Struggled to make it to the end. I want to apologize to all of our fans and viewers who watch along with us.
Hey,
we are so sorry.
At least, look, I had some laughs at how terrible this movie was, and honestly, it was horrible, but it did actually have some. Because the dialogue was so terrible, it was like laugh out loud funny at times. And I did have a good time.
I didn't even get that from it, unfortunately.
Really? I got it.
I couldn't. Here's the difference. Like I told you, I don't think like actually that like Arnold knows that those one-liners are shit, but they're funny when he says them. They're entertaining. You sort of, somehow you can just take it on board. I'll say my last judgment of this movie, because it's a deep cut, but if you get it, this is from the heart. This is from my black, barely beating heart towards Tim Burton and Batman Returns. This movie is almost as bad as the Spawn movie. There you go.
And you're right.
That's stick to the fucking guts right there, let them bleed out.
And with that, the rest of the movies are better, guys. I think we've seen most of these more. They have to be, but we've seen most of these more recently than this one. We will not delude ourselves into hopefully thinking that these other ones were good. We'll be back next week with Scrooged. See you then.